Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. After Lazio Lecce, this weekend could have been terrible because Lazio drew at home against Lecce, a match that we needed to win. But it looks like all the other teams are not interested this year to qualify for the Champions League. And so we are on Monday, and we got 1 point. We are 4 points ahead of AC Milan. Roma drew against Bologna. And Alasdair, what do you make about this? It looks like nobody wants to reach the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things. I'd like to say it's a big surprise, but it isn't by this stage because this has been going on all season. I mean, all the teams below Napoli are just unbelievably flawed this season, ourselves included. But it's been the case now over the last month with Lazio spilling points, blowing a 10-point gap to that they had above fifth place. And it's been the case really that it seems like the best hope of qualifying for the Champions League is relying on everyone else to continue to be as inconsistent as they have been all season. And so far, so good, because Milan now, that's the biggest result. Because thanks to the head-to-head, Lazio now need 5 points from the next 3 games to qualify. And we have a lot of concerns to deal with, Vittorio, which we're going to get through today. But 5 points from 3 games, I mean, surely.
Don't say it. Don't say it. But there's one good thing because Lazio need 5 points if Milan wins all the remaining 3 matches.
Yeah.
But in 2 weeks' time, there's Juventus Milan, which is not an easy match, right? Juventus need points as well. So, if Lazio beats Udinese, that you said, and I want to point it out, you said was the easiest match because Udinese has nothing to fight on.
No. You're changing what I said.
No. You said it.
I said Lecce and Cremonese I was more worried about. I didn't say Udinese was easiest. I think Empoli is the easiest.
Well, okay.
Although there's one thing actually that I do have to admit I didn't consider last week, which was that I forgot that actually 8th place could still be a European spot, because if Roma or Juve win the Europa League, they go into the Champions League and it gets pushed down. So 8th could end up being a Conference League place, and Udinese are 3 points off 8th place. So I was actually wrong in the idea that they have nothing to play for. So I do apologize.
But again, if Lazio beat Udinese and Milan loses against Juventus in 2 weeks' times, it's done. We don't need 5 points. We just need 3. So that's definitely another positive sign. And again, it shows you how the other teams are not focused to this Champions League. We mentioned Milan, but Roma played against Bologna with a B team, and they still had a chance, Alasdair. They still have the chance to fight for the Champions League. Now it's pretty much over. Atalanta, who 1 month ago, Alasdair, you remember we were talking about, be careful because this Atalanta team is playing great football, has lost every single match, I think, since then. And it's now, again, out of the race pretty much. So even if Lazio is not playing great, the other teams, if possible, are playing worse. Now we are 4th. That's the only concern I have. I wanted to finish in the top 3 if possible. But it's still good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a brilliant position to be in at this stage of the season. It's a brilliant position to be in with a fixture list of Udinese, Cremonese, and Empoli to come. It's a bit of a dream finish to the season in terms of running. There's also, I mean, I think we can let Inter go now. I think they've gone. They're going to finish second for me. There's still uncertainty around Juventus and what's going to happen there with the ongoing appeals, investigations, points deductions, so on. There's still a chance that they will be deducted points again. This complete mess of a season in terms of the off-field issues. So anyway, either way, Lazio are in a strong position to qualify for the Champions League, to the point where they've really bottled it if they don't, because needing that many points from these games is a ridiculously good position to be in, regardless of how tired you are or what form you're in. But in both those regards, we do have concerns, don't we? Because Lecce on Friday night was another poor performance and another bad result. One win in the last 5 games now.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And we made a poll this weekend about who to
You, s-
blame for this
you
poor
say
result.
you say we made a poll.
Well, you participate. You were one of the answers. Well, so you were part of the poll, definitely. And it's fun enough to say that the players finished first with 56% of the vote, and you finished second, double of the votes that Sari get, Alasdair. I mean, what can we say?
We can say that we should never underestimate your influence as a propaganda machine. I mean, it's formidable, really. That you've now got this to a point where people think I'm more responsible than the coach of Lazio for results. But there you go. I mean, I just have to put my hands up and accept responsibility, I guess.
Yeah, there are people asking me before the match, is Alasdair going? And if I say yes, oh, we are going to lose this one. So yeah, this is how things going. But honestly, Alistair, I don't know if I'm more upset for the first goal Lecce score or the second one. The first one, you were 1-0 up. There's a couple of minutes. Well, they scored at the last second. You were 1-0 up. No needed to be so advanced. You don't take a counter attack in that situation. That goal was terrible, terrible mistakes, not only from our defense but even for our midfield that was far off position. Right? What's going on? What's going on? Do you think it's all Marcos Antonio to blame?
No, come on. I mean, it's a game that people came away from kind of. I think he came away from as one of the victims of this game in terms of getting a lot of grief, getting a lot of criticism. But um, I think the whole team has a lot of chance for again. The thing is, the goal that you're talking about for me, it's just yet again, it's a bit of disattention. You know, it's the team seems to be losing focus in key moments far too often now, and I don't know if that's a tiredness issue. It's been a long season. You know, it really has. We're going to go into June still in this season. There's been a big gap in the middle, so on. But the two goals, like we talked about last week, the two goals conceded against Milan were both
Yeah,
really silly and avoidable. And again, the goals conceded against Lecce just felt like better organization, better focus, and a bit more leadership maybe on the pitch to make sure that everyone is on message would have helped avoid those things happening. Because it's far too much space in both cases in good positions, and he takes the goals well. Don't get me wrong, but it's frustrating, and I think the biggest reason it's frustrating is really that the defense has been so dependable for so long, and now we've seen, I think it's 8 goals conceded in this run.
yeah, 8 goals in the last 5 match, Alistair, and of these 8 goals, pretty much they're all our mistake. Let's start with Torino, Lazio Torino. Provedel makes a mistake. That's the only goal we concede against Inter. I mean, the first 2 goals of Inter, we give them the ball back. Against Milan, again, mistake from Casale, and then Theo Hernandez, nobody stops him. Against Lecce, we mentioned them already. I mean, it's not mistakes. It's not that the other team does something special. It's that we concede easy goals. And we talked about this a lot. This year, Lazio was relying a lot on defenses because we won a lot of games 1-0, 2-0, etc. Every time we conceded a goal, we struggle to win, right? We won just 3 matches when we conceded a goal. So it's pretty much automatic that if we concede a goal, we don't win. So this is an important point. I think mentally, these players are tired because if you go and look, we always played well. At least in the last 6 months, Alasdair, we played with the same defense, right? Isai, Marusic, Casale, Romagnoli. It looks like we don't have any other option. Lazar is starting sometimes, but not that much, right? So maybe it's these starters are feeling a little bit tired mentally more than physically.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard balance to get because you want to. I think it's also part of the strength of that team is the fact that they have had consistency of selection. They've been able to, create and build an identity and a togetherness, and they've understood each other very well. Um, but yeah, we talked about that before. The Husai and Marisic fullback thing seemed to get locked in after the 4-0 win over Milan. And ever since, that's been the kind of nailed on one. But we've seen now more recently Pellegrini and Lazzari being used as your kind of impact fullbacks, your more attacking fullbacks. And I think they were probably two of the brightest players on the pitch against Lecce. So yeah, I think trying to find the balance has proven to be a bit difficult. Perhaps the absence of Cataldi shouldn't be underestimated here. I mean, never mind blaming Marcos Antonio because I think that's a bit harsh in my opinion. But I think Cataldi has quietly played a really, really important role for this team all season long. Don't forget, he's one of the senior players in this team. He's one of the vice captains in this team. He's a Laziale. He understands. He's been and done it all before. So I think having someone with that level of experience and know-how in the center of the park compared to a guy like Antonio, who's brand new to everything and still trying to work out how to fit into the system, the style of the league and everything, it does make a difference.
I think, Alistair, one of the reasons why we conceded so many goals is that we have lost our balance, and midfield is the key for the balance, right? And already playing with Luis Alberto and Milinkovic Savic is a very offensive mind midfield. If you add Marcos Antonio, who, I mean, it's pretty clear which are his weakness, right? You are off balance, definitely off balance. Cataldi, I think, have learned to give a little bit of balance to this team playing that position. And one of the reasons why Sarri most of the time brings in Vecino in place of Cataldi when Cataldi gets up is because he wants to keep that balance. So again, I wouldn't blame Marcos Antonio for all of that, but I think adding the fact that Felipe Anderson is tired, he came off Friday very early. Zaccagni is not 100% fit. Our team is out of balance and is not defending correctly. Probably Vecino, who got back training, so that's a good news for Udinese, would be very helpful in this situation. Or, and this is the question, do you take off one between Luis Alberto and Milinkovic Savic in this situation to get back a little bit of balance in our defense?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's that's been a question all season long, hasn't it? I mean, we started off this season with the kind of conclusion being drawn by Sarri that you couldn't get the right balance with both of them. So Alberto started the season being on the bench and coming on to impact games later on. But since the turn of the year, he's been in good form. He's worked his way back into the team, and it's Milinkovic Savic we've had the more concerns about. And I guess maybe there's an element of the more criticisms there have been about Milinkovic Savic's form, the more he probably feels like I really need to be going and attacking, making an impact in the final third because he's not been managing to do that, but perhaps at the cost of defensive duties sometimes. So I don't know, it's difficult, but to be honest, I think it's as well, you can't overlook the fact that okay, our rivals will say they'll look at this struggle, this bad run of Lazio form, and they'll hear Lazio fans complaining about tiredness and so on, and they'll say, "Yeah, but you're the only team left who don't have European games in midweek," which is true, apart from Atalanta, obviously. But then again, Lazio it was doing rounds this week. This statistic that Lazio have in all of Europe's top 5 leagues, used the fewest players of any team. Only 22 players have been actually used at all this season, um, which by this stage has to take its toll. And I think both physically and mentally, we've talked about the mental side of it, this kind of lack of focus, I think, and just like drifting in and out of games a bit too much and conceding soft goals. But also, I do think there has to be a physical element by this stage. Not obviously, it helps not having midweek games all the time at the moment, but that doesn't mean that these guys won't be tired, because the same guys have been playing all season long, and they have been playing in 3 competitions. So
Not only Alasdair, I would add that the number is interesting, but you have to add that players like Gila in the last couple of months or so
yeah,
had hardly played. Patrick started against Sassuolo, but apart from that, he hardly saw the pitch.
Romero, Cancellieri, yeah, hardly any
Radu.
games.
I mean, the true fact is that I think we have something like 13, 14 players who played more than 100 minutes, something like that. So it's basically we are using always the same players. It's always them playing. The bench players are. I mean, Marcos Antonio is starting now because we don't have any other option. He was another player that was coming in when he was coming in the last 5, 7 minutes. Basic again. So this tells you that we don't have a deep roster. We don't have enough options, and this is why our team is tired, even though we're not playing in the Euro. One thing, Alistair, Jose Mourinho yesterday said, my team is not able to compete in 2 different events. That's why we gave up the Campionato. Dybala, Belotti, Wijnaldum, Matic. I mean, we complain about Sarri, complaining that he hasn't got enough depth, and then Mourinho goes out and say the same thing Sarri said, and no one argued with Mourinho. I mean, there's something wrong, right?
I was wondering how long it's the 17-minute mark
I
before.
still didn't talk about ref.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a long pod.
Yeah, but we've been hearing this with Mourinho for 2 years now. It's something he's talked about from the very start, is his lack of squad depth and so on. And I think a lot of it is to prove a point and make a show, and put pressure on his owners to invest more and improve what he's got. The thing he does have that Lazio don't have is a reasonably competitive Primavera squad to help. And obviously the game against Bologna yesterday, they promoted a load of young players, and he has been quite good at that. I mean, whether it's politically a political gesture that he's promoting all these youth guys or not is another question, but he has been able to bring through the likes of Eduardo Bove and make him a first team player. And Lazio's youth team just doesn't seem to be of a high enough level that Sarri, even if he wanted to, would really be able to do that. Because I've seen a few comments of people saying things like this recently with, oh, why don't we get in, Crespi or whoever to help out with this team, Bertini or whatever. And I think the answer is they've been playing in Primavera B all season. Okay, they've now been promoted, which is great, but it's still it's a huge jump.
Yeah. I would add something that Bertini was nearly coming in against AC Milan because Marcos Antonio got hit and he was struggling. The other point is everybody's talking about Valerio Crespi. I saw him playing in the last 2 years or so. He's not bad. He's interesting. But I would say if the Italian national team under 19 never called him up, then you have to argue there's something there, right? I mean, we've been talking about Armin in the past. He's been called under 16, under 14, under 17, under 18, under 19. And he looks to not be fit for Lazio. None of the Lazio players in the Primavera I'm talking about hasn't been called in the last 2 years for the national team. This must tell you something, right, Alasdair? So I think it's not Sarri saying, I don't want to start any of these guys. Is probably these guys are not ready, right? We've been talking a lot about Floriano Mussolini, who has been called a couple of times at least for the first squad, but never played a single minute. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if, and I repeat, if we qualified before the last game, that this player will have a chance in the last game if we already qualified. But I don't think they're ready. And the fact that Bertini was still playing with a Primavera, even if he was age ready for the first squad, tells you a lot, I think. And now we have Diego Gonzalez on the bench because Luca Romero left. Uh, People are talking very high about this player. Let's test him at a big level. I'm not sure he's ready for the Serie A. So I don't know. Obviously, Roma Primavera, they won the Coppa Italia this year. They're always fighting for the title every single year. Obviously, they are better. They can provide better players for the first squad rather than Lazio, right? So this is another concern. Again, we mentioned Cataldi very often so far. Cataldi is the only player coming off the Primavera squad still in our team. So this tells you a lot.
Yeah. And what do you think about generally this something that's been in the papers a lot in the last few days since the Lecce game has been this idea of a midfield revolution coming up this summer, and that's the kind of area of the squad that's going to be, I guess, rebuilt to a certain extent. And I was reading Corriere dello Sport this morning, and they're saying the three who are in are Cataldi, Vecino, Alberto. The three who are out is Milinkovic, Antonio, and Basic. Um, we'll see about that. But what do you think about the idea generally of the midfield needing to be kind of reconstructed, or this revolution?
Well, again, I think it makes sense. We have been talking about balance. This midfield doesn't provide balance. There's a lot of quality, especially when Milinkovic Savic play at his level. But if you have Luis Alberto, you need someone close to him, a Vecino style of player, I would say. Maybe someone who can be more dynamic than Vecino. So someone that can help in defending. And same thing about the play. Cataldi is fine. You need another one who can give balance to this team. So yes, we need a revolution. You mentioned Basic is another player that in 2 years have played very, very little, very, very little. Again, why did we sign a player like that if Sari doesn't need him? If Sari doesn't think he's useful to the team? So they have been. I would be intrigued to see Rovella coming because one of the players linked to Lazio has been Rovella. He's very young. He's been playing with Monza very well this year. Obviously, Monza is not the same team as Lazio. You feel a different pressure, but I would love to have a younger team and younger players with this talent. Don't know if it's going to happen, but it would be intriguing, right?
Yeah, it would certainly continue the kind of trend from last summer of signing or going for players who both have Serie A experience already and who are of a younger age to bring down the average age of the squad a bit. Um, I think it's it's natural to look to kind of for where you can improve, but we need to be a little bit cautious with this, I think, in terms of ripping everything up. I think because the form has fallen off a cliff recently, everyone immediately starts looking at trying to find things that are a disaster. But the reality is, this team is 6 points better off than they were last season. They're very close to achieving Champions League qualification, which is a huge, huge thing that barely anyone predicted at the start of the season, let's remember. Um, and I don't think you necessarily need to absolutely rip everything to shreds because of what's happening recently. Yeah, I think the balance question is certainly a good one. But does that mean that you have to get rid of half of your midfield and bring in an entirely new one to then almost have to start again from scratch? We've seen already under Sarri that he really needs players to take their time to learn the kind of game he wants to play. We've seen that with Pellegrini really not getting many chances since arriving. Seen that with Marcos Antonio's struggles and to get into the team since he's arriving. So I would agree that the midfield could do with a couple of new bodies, but I'm not sure that a revolution is necessarily the answer.
Well, well, but there's a thing we have to point out. Milinkovic Savic wants to leave. It's not Lazio want to sell Milinkovic. He wants to leave. So you're basically replacing only one starter because Luis Alberto and Cataldi are staying, right? So Milinkovic wants to leave. Otherwise, he would be staying. And I think using this opportunity of Milinkovic Savic leaving, you have to find a balance. Now you have the chance because let's be honest, with Luis Alberto and Milinkovic Savic, Sarri's job was how can I make them play together? Because they're probably the most talented players we have. So the job of Sarri was okay, I have to find a way to make them start and play together. Now, if you sell Milinkovic Savic, Sarri can say, okay, now give me a player I can use to build a good midfield, stronger and more balanced than now. I want to keep Luis Alberto. Cataldi is a good option. So now I need another player who has quality and who can provide me a little bit of balance. Probably a dynamic player we need, someone faster because we have a slow midfield. Cataldi is not very fast. Luis Alberto is not fast, and Sergei is not never has been fast. So I think it's a revolution that you have to do because Basic hardly played. So is he gonna start now that Milinkovic is leaving? I cannot believe it. It's very hard to believe that. Marcos Antonio has proved not to be fit to play in this team. Well, if you sell Milinkovic, maybe Marcos Antonio can stay, depending on who you sign. But I think, Alasdair, that if you qualify for the Champions League, you need even to do a little revolution in front. Um, Ciro is 33 years old, and he missed a lot of matches this year. Felipe Anderson played every single game. Pedro, I think he's a little bit um, struggling now. Zaccagni is not 100% fit, and you can see it. I think you need a Vice Mobile and another winger there. So you have to do a little revolution pretty much everywhere except in defense.
Yeah, I think you're right about the attack. I mean, it's with basically only four players up there. It's not going to be good enough, especially for a Champions League. Let's not forget if it. I mean, we don't really want to talk about playing in the Champions League with any certainty yet for the reasons we've already stated. But if you were to be in the Champions League, I think that European campaign has to be taken a lot more seriously than we have done in recent years. And you need a deeper squad and a higher level of quality. I think Pedro deserves another year of contract to be a useful impact player, squad player, but not as a guy who needs to play every single week.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've talked about Immobile before. We've not actually mentioned the fact that he scored against Lecce yet, but it's his first home goal since September, so that was great.
Incredible.
And that was like an old school Lazio goal. Alberto gets the ball, plays a through ball, Ciro finishes. It's like, I don't know why, and I might be wrong, but it just feels like I've not seen that goal for a while, and it's such a trademark Lazio goal. But anyway, so that was good. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting summer ahead. I think so much of it will depend on top four or not,
Yeah.
both in terms of budget and in terms of the caliber of player Lazio are able to attract. Because I think if you can dangle Champions League football in front of them, it's going to help as well. So yeah.
Alasdair, we were talking before starting our recording. The positive thing is that we have been linked with 95% of the time, I would say, with very good players, right? In the past, we were linked with a third tier Bosnian midfielder, fourth league Albanian striker, etc. Now we are linked to Kulusevski, who will be an amazing signing, but very difficult. Rovella, Berardi, etc. I mean, that's an improvement, right? And I think it's all due to Sarri because the biggest difference we notice is that Inzaghi would have accept what Sarri would bring him, while on the other side, Sarri wants the players he wants. He wouldn't accept again the likes of Basic or other type of players like that, right?
Yeah, and I think that with top four, especially, Lazio will be quite an attractive proposition to sell to targets in the summer, because if you Sadi is an attractive manager for players to play under. He's got a reputation. People like his style of football. They want to be a part of that, playing the game in the right way kind of idea. If you can combine that with Champions League experience, and also you would therefore also be able to sell the idea of year on year improvement to a target as well, because if we finish top four this year, obviously that's a step over from last season. So
Yeah.
I think that that would put Lazio in a really strong position. I mean, I don't mean to ramp up the pressure even more ahead of this last three games of the season, but it is worth occasionally reflecting on how important nowadays, especially Champions League qualification, is for a club, um, beyond the actual joy of a fan of hearing the anthem and being at those games. The actual economic factor is enormous, and
Especially for a team like Lazio, who has little revenue, and most of the revenues come from TV rights and achievement. So getting the Champions League means 40, 50 million euros guarantees. And
yeah,
the good thing is that Lazio is pretty much debt free. So it's not that those 40 million euros goes in the pay debts and things like that. Is money that you can use to sign players. And if you add this to this, I think what big chance that we are selling Milinkovic Savic, you should have really a big amount of money you can spend. Now, rumors are that Juventus don't want to pay a lot for Sergei, but if we can get a little bit of money and a couple of players from Juventus for Sergei, would you be happy, Alasdair?
not to Juventus, no.
Mm.
To be honest, in any circumstances, I won't be happy if he's sold to a Serie A club. That has been my rule from the very start of, 7 years ago when Sergei was first linked with a move away from Lazio. I think that they have to do whatever they can to get his agent to go and speak to clubs in the Premier League,
Or
or
Paris Saint-Germain.
get him over to Paris. So yeah, I think that I really, really don't want to see him playing for another Serie A club. I'm not really sure he would want to after this time as well. He's got a great rapport, obviously, with the fans in this stage, and there's just always something a bit funny about that to me. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit nervous now that we're actually talking about this so much. The other thing with the Champions League as well is that you have to remember the last time we qualified obviously was a COVID year, so we didn't actually feel the full benefits of it as much, because obviously the revenues and sponsorship money and everything that you normally get was a fraction of what it could have been.
Yeah, definitely. If we go into the Champions League, the full Campaniles family is going to every single match of the Champions League. So,
And they've got money.
not sure about that. Alistair, before we wrap it up, we talk about Udinese Lazio, but let's not forget that then there is Lazio Cremonese, and you know what date is Lazio Cremonese? It's the 28th of May. So what happened 2 days before?
10-year anniversary.
10 years anniversary. It looks like a lot of former Lazio player would be there, and Lazio would do this memorial shirt that you can book or in advance, pre-order in advance from the official website. I'm not getting any money out of that, so don't think it's my personal promotion. It's not cheap. Let's start with this point. It's not cheap. 125. It's expensive for a shirt that they will never wear, right? It's true that they say that in this anniversary kit you will get a track jacket, a t-shirt, a hat, a scarf, a backpack, and a bowl. So there's a lot of things,
How
but
much?
125 plus €7 if you want the Serie A badge, and if you want the personalization, I think it's other €20. So it's not very cheap, right? Even though you get a lot of things. I mean, it's end of the season. They could have done like something like $60, something like that.
Yeah, and it does take away the point of it a little bit, which is it's essentially you're making an anniversary of a really special moment for the club and its fans, which was obviously the Coppa Italia win over Roma. But if it's something you're all wanting to celebrate together, it feels a little bit weird if you're then trying to fleece fans of hundreds of euros on the side. I mean, I'm glad that they are acknowledging it and they've decided to do something about it, because I think it's great. But to be honest, more excited about the fact that the team is going to be put back together at the Olimpico. That would be great. Senad Lulic is coming over apparently.
Yep.
So yeah, that'll be nice. It's and there's a chance it can coincide with Lazio nailing down how many years in a row finishing ahead of Roma now? I don't know.
Is this the third or the fourth?
Can't remember.
Yeah.
Let's just say most of the years since I moved to Rome. So whatever the Campanile propaganda says, it's been a good run.
I could add, how many times did you see Roma lose this year at the stadium?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the point. I hope you're not going to Germany on Thursday.
I'm not, no.
Okay.
But there's a chance I'm going to Hungary if they get to the final.
Oh my. We'll anyway, we should talk a little bit. Maybe we should do a podcast about this. How Lazio hasn't treated very well former Lazio players, right? Lulic retired 2 years ago, and this will be the first time he comes back to the Stadio Olimpico. Even Miro Klose hasn't been treated very well. It's a shame, Alasdair, right? It's a shame because fans love this type of players. It would be good to have them in the team, right? Club manager, sport director, or even president or things like that. It's a shame Lazio or Lotito better don't think about these things.
Yeah, and speaking of Roma, that is completely in contrast to Roma, who are constantly parading ex-players in front of the Curva Sud before games. They just had their 40-year anniversary of one of their Scudetti as well, and had like the whole team there. Yeah, it'd be nice. I mean, it's strange, isn't it? Because it feels like it happens quite a lot, but the reason it feels like that is because basically that entire Scudetto team have become coaches, so they're constantly back at the Olimpico, but as managers of another club. We've had Conceição, Simeone, Stankovic, all these guys kind of being paraded back in front of the Olimpico crowd, but not actually because of the club, but because they're coaches now. So yeah, you got to celebrate your past achievements, your past glories as much as possible. What's the point otherwise? So no, Lulic should be obviously a great one to have back again, and be interesting to see how how the crowd reacts to all that as well, because I think it could be a great bit of buoyancy as well for what's actually going to be a very important game, last home game of the season, and obviously it could be the one that seals Champions League qualification. So hopefully get a big crowd in for that one.
Yeah, we weren't that much for Lazio Lecce, unfortunately. To wrap it up, would you love to see Lulic in the Lazio club, like club manager, like Peruzzi did, or in some other position? Do you think it would be good for the club?
I think he seems to be quite happy with his life, isn't he? He seems to have a great time just in Switzerland, in the mountains, skiing, and I don't know.
I think he did he's doing the course he did at Coverciano to become manager, right? So Maybe he's looking for an opportunity. Rumors are, we didn't talk about Stefan Radus. It's going to be the last match at home of Stefan Radu, and it looks like he's going to do a little bit like Simone Inzaghi. He's going to start next year as a manager of one of the youth team of Lazio. That's something I like. That's something former Lazio players should be able to do, and Lazio should do even more. Inzaghi did it. Rocchi was doing the same, but they never moved him to the Lazio Primavera, which is a shame. I thought he was doing good. But it would be interesting to see what Stefan Radu does, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine Radu is definitely along the lines of the kind of the old school manager, not afraid to shout at his players. There'll be a team of bastards kicking everyone. Yeah. I'd be quite interested to see the Stefan Radu philosophy and how it works out.
Yeah, that could be interesting. And again, you can find another Simone Inzaghi in the making. Thanks, Alasdair. I don't know if you have something else to add.
Nope.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Remember, you can support us on patreon.com/Lazio Lounge, and crossing fingers, Lazio Udinese Lazio coming up next Sunday night game. Very important match, and hope to be back on Monday with more good news about Lazio. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.